Right. Evening, colleagues, and welcome to tonight's Audit and Governance Committee. It's nice to see the sun has decided it's still summer and has come out for us today. Right, have we got any apologies for absence, Marie?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Malik and the independent member, Helen King. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I go on, can I remind members and officers in attendance in the rooms to please remember to switch off microphones when speaking and speak directly into the microphone and switch off when finished. Reporting off officers joining via Teams, please switch cameras and microphones on when speaking and off when finished. Use the hands up icon on Teams to indicate a question or comment for the chair to invite you to speak. The meeting this evening will be live streamed, and a recording of the meeting will be available on the council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. I think it's also on YouTube. Any exempt items private on the agenda, at paragraph 14, the chair, I will move the Local Government Act 1972 for the meeting to go into private and the live stream will stop. There will be a short delay before taking those items. Move on to item 2, minutes of the meeting for the 4th of June. For those that are in attendance, can we go through each page for accuracy? Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Any changes required? Right, for those that are in attendance on the 4th of June, do you agree that it's a true reflection of the meeting that took place?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, we now move to item 3 for disclosures of interest. Everybody's been sent the papers. So if there's any declarations of interest, if you either say it now or if you forget, and as we get to the item, you go, wow, I need to declare, please don't hold back to declare. And if appropriate and necessary, remove yourself from the meeting. Yep, thank you. Right, item 4, section 106, Local Government Finance Act. Those items on the agenda affected by section 106 of the Local Government Act 1992 will be identified at the meeting. Any members so affected is reminded that they should disclose the fact and refrain from voting on those items. Item 5, urgent business. Are there any urgent business? Thank you. Item 6, are there any references from committees and other bodies? Okay. Thank you. We now move to item 7, Audit and Governance Committee Effectiveness Review. Can I now hand over to Daniel and Aidan, please? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon and good evening, colleagues. My name's Aidan Rave. I'm from GGI, Good Governance Institute. This is my colleague, Daniel Taylor. It's a great pleasure to be back in Loon. I've been to this building many times, never a chore, always enjoy coming back. And my background is local government, so it's never a chore to be back in a council chamber again. So looking forward to spending a little bit of time with you this evening. I know time is short, so we will press through this presentation reasonably quickly. I think some slides will be appearing, won't they, Kanchan, in a second. What I'm intending to do, Madam Chair, is just work through the slides reasonably quickly. Happy to pivot back to them if we want to go back and look in any greater detail at any specific slide. But they're really, sorry.
So I was going to ask, where do you want to take questions? You're going to take questions and any comments at the end of your presentation, or are you happy for colleagues to ask as you go along?
Don't mind. Probably if we just whip through and do the headlines, and then we can go back if we want.
Okay, so if I can ask my colleagues to write your questions down or any comments, and then when they're finished, their presentations, we can come in.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Over
We'll
to
be
you.
nice and quick. We'll be nice and quick. And what we're about to really just highlight is already in the report that you've had. So that there's nothing new in this. This is simply a reiteration of some of the key points. If we can just pop onto the next slide, please, Kanchan. So just to kind of review a quick recap of what you asked for. Really, the key word there is an objective assessment, or the key words are an objective assessment. We come in. This is a piece of work that GGI do in lots of different organisations. We work with councils, we work with NHS trusts, we work with large charities, housing associations to conduct reviews of effectiveness of their audits and audit committees or audit and governance committees, depending on what they're said, what they're particularly called. And our role is really to bring that objectivity, to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, to see it with an objective view, and then to benchmark it against what we see to be the core principles of good governance that we apply to the other organisations that we work with. And I'll touch on exactly what that means in a moment or two. And we also made reference to the CIPFA best practice guidance as well, because CIPFA have issued a series of guidelines in terms of how audit and governance committees should operate. And we refer to those as part of the framework that we created the benchmarking from too. As again, I'll reiterate in a moment. And we've set out some findings and provided a few recommendations, which you will see in the report that we submitted already. If we can just move on to the next slide. So just in terms of the methodology that we use an approach called triangulation. Many of you will be familiar with it. So that's based on our kind of insight and judgment, based on the work that we do with lots of organisations, as I've already mentioned. We also undertook a review of your paperwork, the documents that are available for meetings, and we also, between us, Daniel and I, observed this meeting or previous incarnations of this meeting via YouTube and sort of, used that as part of our thinking. And then, as many of you will know, the third kind of point of the triangle, if you like, is the conversations that we had with many of you a few months ago now, just to probe into what's working, what isn't working, how well do you think things are going, and you were all extremely helpful and extremely candid with that. So thank you for being so helpful with those. And what we basically do is use that as an approach to try and test one element against the other. So what's our kind of sector experience telling us? What's the papers telling us? What are you telling us, basically? And we work through that as a methodology. We just jump on Kanchan. So I talked a little bit about benchmarking. This is quite a busy slide. We'll supply the slide deck to Kanchan after the meeting, so you don't have to scribble this down or anything. It will be made available. But these are basically the three areas that we use. We use a series of metrics that we base on our approach for working with audit and governance committees across different sectors. At the other end, we, as I mentioned, use the CIPFA guidance and best practice. In the middle is really the kind of core of GGI's methodology in terms of reviewing the effectiveness of governance, and it's based on a man called Professor Mervyn King, who's a South African judge, worked with the new regime post-apartheid in establishing the principles of good governance in South Africa, in the new South Africa, and is widely seen to be the one of the kind of key thinkers in governance. So we use that four bubble model there that you can see in front of you in terms of the purpose of governance is to create an ethical culture, to create value, to demonstrate legitimacy to the organisation, and to enable the governors of the organisation to exercise effective control over the organisation's safe kind of management. So that's kind of the worksheet that we worked from. If we just jump on again, Kanchan. So what are the three key points? This is kind of the key messages, I guess, that we want to try and get across to you. The headline message is that this is a well-functioning committee. It's got a good reputation with the rest of the organisation, and it's got a good reputation with the stakeholders that we spoke to. That's very much down to you, to the chair, to the members, and you make it what it is, and the officers that support it too. It's seen to be fair and objective. It's seen to be separated from the political parts of the council, which is really important element of the approach certainly in relation to SIPFA guidelines, and it is but by any measure an organizer, a committee that's functioning effectively. However, there is definitely a sense of restlessness amongst you as members and as chair to develop that further. I don't think there's any sense, we didn't get any sense whatsoever from the conversations that we had that you wanted to rest on your laurels, and we've identified a few areas that we think are quite helpful in giving you a pointer on where you might want to develop the effectiveness of the committee even further. And one of those, I think we've, as that third point sets out, is really for the committee to take a slightly more assertive approach. Maybe another way of describing that would be to be slightly more proactive, to look ahead at what you want to do, what you think the key challenges are for the council and indeed for the community of Luton going forward, and how you might be more kind of proactive in setting the agenda for how you can support the work of the council to be more effective and more impactful on the people of Luton. And let's face it, it's a challenging time for local government. I don't need to tell you that. You know it. You live it every day. So the importance of ensuring that the core services that people rely on a daily basis are in a good shape is critical work to not only to the council but to the people of Luton as well. So there is, I think, a real opportunity for the committee to fulfil that objective that I set out in the King 4 diagram of really creating value for the people in Luton. So there, if nothing else, they're the real kind of three fundamental points that we wanted to get across today. Daniel, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Aidan. So where's the headroom then? As Aidan has said, what we've seen is a committee that's effective, that's working well, that's got the respect of key officers, and has got many of the fundamentals in place. So where is the growth? And this is very much a kind of good to great kind of judgment, as opposed to a, in development or in improvement to good. As Aidan said, partly it's about being more proactive in the agenda planning and thinking about more strategic areas of deep dive work. So and orientating those around both the bold strategy that the council has, the Luton 2040 strategy, but also around the key strategic risk areas for the council. So using that as an actual a mechanism and a framing for those kind of deep dive areas of work. We think that in terms of oversight of the committee, if there is a gap, it's around subsidiaries. Since 2011 in particular, lots of councils have found themselves in positions with quite significant subsidiary arrangements. Often those subsidiaries carry significant reputational risk or financial risk that's substantive to the authority itself. So there's a real need for diligent governance and oversight of them. Obviously, you have separate governance arrangements for those subsidiaries, and your internal audit plan involves external audits of those subsidiaries, but most of that reports almost entirely reports back through that separate governance arrangement. And we think that the committee ought to have more direct oversight at appropriate intervals, not too heavy-handed, but it would be remiss of it not to have the occasional deep dive into some of those significant subsidiaries like Vauxhall Homes or Luton Airport. There's a more minor point about papers. Generally, papers are of reasonable quality, but there's perhaps a little bit of wiggle room in terms of how they platform discussion. Don't strangle the life perhaps out of too many questions, and actually try and frame the discussion clear in their ask of the committee to make best use of your time, but also to encourage debate and discussion in a productive manner. That's a more minor point. There were certain points made to us in the process about areas of training. So various committee members thought that it would be helpful to have perhaps some more focused training session on various aspects of the committee's work, to be more informed in those discussions and to be able to provide better challenge and scrutiny. So we've noted some of those in the report. They might be good deep dive areas. You could pair both training and that kind of strategic deep dive together. But it's all part of that more proactive business planning. And lastly, there's another important aspect of the governance of local authorities are overview and scrutiny committees. There's probably work to do in building the dialogue and doing a bit of coordination and co-planning with the council's overview and scrutiny committee, but also there is a finance working group as well. So where you get those areas of overlap in duties and responsibilities, it might be a useful development for the chairs of those committees to have more proactive engagement and do more strategic coordination and planning of agenda items, so that there is that full, sound, triangulated assurance across the key organs of governance. And that's, I think, they're the key areas I wanted to pull out, because keen to have questions. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. So if we just jump on to the next slide, Kanchan, please. So we're recommending, we've made 5 recommendations in the report. We're happy to talk through any of these in more detail, but effectively, as you can see there, we think you would benefit from a clearer plan at the beginning of the annual cycle. So that point about being more proactive, these are the key strategic issues we think are facing Luton. This is what we think we want to look at. Of course, that might change as the year goes, because things happen, don't they? But to at least have that plan would give the opportunity to almost lay down the marker of the committee as to what you say the important things that you want to work with the council on. At the other end of that, we think you do some great work, and it would be a fantastic thing to report that back to the council more formally, so you can demonstrate what you've done. You can demonstrate that the impact that it's had on issues that are relevant to the council. So there's a kind of a cycle there, isn't there? Looking ahead and also looking backwards and saying, you've done some really good work, let the council know. There's a general point there about being ahead of the curve. So don't wait for the council to tell you things that it thinks are important. You work out what you think are important and tell the council that they should be thinking about these areas. Of course, that's always going to be a dialogue. It's always going to be a two-way process. And you are the council after all, but you play an important role in terms of the council's, keeping the council safe, really, in terms of its objectives. So the more that you're thinking ahead, I think the more helpful, and again, the more value that creates for the council. There's a point about being more concise in the papers. Daniel picked it up, and we think that that's an opportunity really to be able to get across in shorter order what the key points of a particular piece of work are. Perhaps just reordering the agenda slightly to use a kind of purpose paragraph in there to really lay out to members, this is what it's for, this is why it's really important, this is what we're going to do about it. And of course, then maybe, appendicize some of the other work. We do a lot of work with organisations on the kind of administration and the thousands and thousands of hours that councils like yours and NHS trusts use in administrating meetings is there's always savings to be made. So it's a sensible thing to propose. And finally, then we've put a point about focusing on development. So there is clearly an appetite, came back from many of you, for training and for learning. We think that's a good thing to do. We definitely, and we know you do some of it as well. So we're not suggesting that you don't do it. We know you do it. But we think there's an opportunity to perhaps align it a little bit more with that strategic approach that we talked about and that getting ahead of the agenda. So there are lots and lots, as we know, of challenges ahead. So there's an opportunity to sequence, if you like, the priorities of the committee and the training that you do as well. So we thought that might be quite helpful. Is that the final slide? I think one final slide. So really, that's all it was. 4 kind of actions that because we wanted to just set these out in action. So we think be more strategic and proactive. As you can see there, work towards kind of more collaboration between your business cycle and that of the council. Do the training, which will increase your confidence, and then look at the issue of the papers and think about a kind of short, sharp approach to paper production. That's it, Chair. We'll leave it at that because we've talked a lot, and happy to pick up any questions.
Colleagues, any questions? Yeah, Councillor Hussain.
Yeah, can I ask you? I mean, when we did the training the last time, this was one of the questions. I mean, members can only make a judgment and be challenged in the information given to them. Yeah, and the relevant information is not given as good as it should be it is the quality of the information given by the officers, because if I was the expert on finance and that, I'll be working for the PwC rather than sitting here. So that really is, to me, is the important thing that one needs to take into account. And sometimes the papers are too long and members do not really go through all of them. How do you think that we need to be in probably a bit more training throughout the year, and also the information that we can really be challenging, because it's a pretty long question. Number of 30 that are really gone bankrupt is members will not challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I mean, that's obviously a really salient point about the information that you're given, which is precisely why part of our recommendation is to really focus some of the papers to make sure you are getting the information. But the other thing I would say is, in our experience, one of the most valuable things that members can bring is that kind of objective perspective themselves. They don't necessarily need to be financial experts in order to ask good questions. You know, that concept of there's no such thing as a daft question. There is absolutely no such thing as a daft question when it comes to assurance. So it's partly just about perhaps asking the question that the resident of Luton would ask, because they're not necessarily going to be informed about local authority finance. They thankfully would be spared of that. But the kind of pointed and simple question of why do we do it like that? Why do we look at it that way? Is actually a really powerful one, and it's one that we always encourage committees like this to use, and use to the fullest of their ability.
Should we go ahead, Councillor Hussain, and then Councillor Underwood?
You mentioned in terms of risk, I mean, and the mitigation for it. That needs to be pretty clear for members to be able to understand what but because we've got some of the major projects like the airport and Foxhole Home, those are the two of the big spots where there are real challenges. And we need to be really, if we don't get the risk with every time, there are difficulties. And the projects, we had a very large one which started off with, say, 230 million, and then finally paying up nearly 300 million pounds. Nobody told us that at the beginning. That's what's going to happen. Yeah. So I think those are the things that we need to be very much mindful of it right at the beginning, and challenging the people, the officers, that is it really what the final bill is going to be.
You can come back. You can respond.
So yes, that's a really important point. Risk is a fantastic lens for assurance, right? So I think the point that we were making about the papers and the focus of the papers, you can use risk, aligning the material in papers to identified risks, and using risk as a lens to frame discussion is a really helpful way of one, having the papers formatted, but two, having that as a direct avenue into discussion. To make sure that the assurance work that you're doing is really targeted around those areas, one, that are high risk, and then exploring the nature of risk within those areas themselves. So that point that my colleague Aidan was making about how the front sheet of the paper is constructed to get very clear, to be very clear about the purpose of the paper, the ask of the committee. One other aspect of that could be to really elucidate the risk context of the particular item. But yes, it's a really important point, and it's common practice. Particularly in the NHS, if you were to look at papers of an NHS committee, they're very, very good at being front and centre about the risk context of all of their business.
Councillor Underwood.
Thank you, Chair. Got a question about being proactive rather than reactive. Do you think it would be a good idea if the committee worked with the relevant officers to put together a list of ongoing or upcoming projects that we think, or generally people think the council officers think would be of interest that we need to have a look at? So like a forward plan of upcoming.
Yeah, Chair, that's exactly really what we're proposing, is that opportunity to take a more kind of strategic look. And 12 months is a reasonable timeline, but you could look longer than that as well, because there are challenges like the airline industry doesn't just work in a 12-month horizon, does it? It works in 5, 10, 15, 20-year horizons. So the opportunity to look forward at, what are the prospects for the airport over the next 10, 20 years, I think would be a really interesting area for you to look at where some of those risks are now, and how those risks will evolve. And also what some of those opportunities are too. It's not just about looking at the risks; it's also about looking at the opportunities. So we very much are, echoing that point that there's an opportunity for, if you like, for you to set the agenda a little bit more in terms of some of the audit and governance work that you want to do. Not in an adversarial way with the council. We're not suggesting that at all. In actually a helpful way to the council, because you'll be looking at the things that they're going to be. Well, you are the council as well, aren't you? So you're going to be concerned about, and your residents are going to be concerned about over that period. We just think it's a real opportunity to, rather than be in a reactive position where the council is saying, well, here's an issue, we need to look at it, that you're kind of picking up a bit more of the initiative to say, no, we think these are the key issues over the next few years. We think we really need to look at those. And the opportunity then, I think, is to, precisely as the previous speaker was saying, is to pick up where some of those risks are going forward and have more ownership of them as a committee. So you're more familiar with the issues, you've got more opportunity to dive into the detail, and to be more robust then in your challenge to officers and to other stakeholders about what the kind of real issues are at the heart of it.
Thank you. I think, yes, so my other question would be about, you mentioned assessing the operational context of the council. When we were talking about governance structures, this is more of a comment than a question, but as a committee, we really need to be more aware of those structures and how things, and as you say, the operational context, so that we can have an informed opinion on what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. The committee does quite a lot of work looking at management processes and procedures, but actually, what about governance structures, and particularly those that are shared or intersectional? Of course, in the context of integrated care arrangements, the council is far more involved in shared governance arrangements with healthcare organisations, VCC organisations, taking a more proactive view in that space. Really generative work, really trying to help assure that the robustness and effectiveness of those governance structures, but also internally as well. That's probably an area of growth and absolutely something that this committee could add value to in looking at.
Any more questions or comments from colleagues? Councillor Skeppelhorn.
Thank you, Chair. I was struck particularly about the agendas lengthwise, and I think there is a risk of missing vital information because the agenda has been condensed, but also currently things are couched in technical terminology, which also gives us a possibility of missing the nuance of what that means. So if we're going to look at the agendas, we need a balance between plain English and not losing vital information, which possibly can only be put in technical terms, but if it's going to be, it needs proper explanation.
Yeah. That's again a really great point. We're certainly not suggesting that there should be an omission of any key information in the agendas or papers. I guess what we're saying is this is about signposting and about the way that you can use the agenda itself to point to where the key issues are, and where perhaps some of the background reading might be. So rather than having a full paper, it might be that there's a shorter paper, but with appendices that are then signposted from the agenda item that takes the reader to them. So that's really what we're trying to get at. This is a maturity point, and this goes for all our comments, Chair. We think this is a really good committee. We said that we're really impressed by the work that you do, but we sensed from talking to you that there's a desire to do more and to become better. And I guess what we've tried to do is provide some gentle challenge back to you that says, well, look, if you want to get better, these are the areas where you can really stretch your maturity as a committee. And one of them, what the very best committees that we work with do, is they really manage their agenda so that they don't have rainforests fulls of kind of papers. They have really relevant introductions, and then the ability to dig in, should the reader want to, into the detail that they need to back up the original point. But the point's brought out, and it's really sharp and clear and concise, so that it helps make better decisions, really.
Yeah, Councillor Farouk.
Thank you, Chair. Is that my understanding that your recommendation is that we should have full control over the agenda and try to put what we want to hear? Or is there anything else that you think we should be doing differently?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's more active input, in that process, but doing it in a way that kind of surveys the landscape. So starts from the point of thinking about the forward strategy of the council, starts thinking about the strategic areas of risk, looks at things like substantive programs going on in the council that carry reputational risk, financial implication and risk, etc. And from that supplement the kind of the standing agenda items of business that you must get through, your fiduciary and legal responsibilities, with some of these more strategic areas, and that can be a really generative discussion to enter into, and a process to engage in as a committee with obviously the relevant key officers, to do that thinking together and to map that forward view out together. And absolutely, that's something that we think is a collaborative exercise.
Just add something to that, Chair. I mean, I think that's a really good point. I wouldn't even see this as necessarily an audit and governance issue. I'd start from what are the key issues that are important to the people of Luton. You know these because this is what you do. Start with that as a list. Are we? If you spend an hour or two in this room together, just between you, kind of setting out where are the key priorities, where are the risks, where are the opportunities, and then almost map that onto, are we confident as a committee that we're across each of those issues from an audit and governance perspective? If we are, that's great. If we're not, maybe that's an area we need to turn our attention to a little bit more. And that's the point of kind of being a bit more proactive on the agenda. This is not, coming up with a completely new slate of issues. This is about the stuff that you deal with on a daily basis, but making sure that it's transferred into the work of this committee, because that will contribute the greatest value, not only to the council, but to the people of the place,
Before we conclude, I just want to make sure that I've sort of got things right. So in summary, because we've got our work plan, our draft work plan already, in moving forward, would it be good, sort of question here, that we maybe from best practice and from other organisations that you've worked with, that we spend some time to do an overlay with our current draft, then link it with the risk register, and then what's going on. That needs a bit of time, really. That is not necessarily done before or in this space because it's a public meeting. But to do that type of work, we need to create some space for reflection. Would that be a sort of fair conclusion, what you've seen other authorities do? Have I got that correct?
Yes, Chair, absolutely. That would be when we talked about training in the report, when we talked about some development time, that's exactly the sort of thing we're talking about. So a bit of time to you as a committee to really focus on, making sure you are all very clear as a committee what those issues are. And it's not that you won't be doing them. You probably are already doing some of them. It's more just you're assuring yourself that your priorities are expressed in the forward programme for the committee and that they're in step with the key challenges that are facing Luton as a council and as a place. So it's just an alignment process, really.
Okay, do you want to finish first or?
No, go ahead.
Sure.
No,
Thank
you
you.
go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It was a comment. I was waiting for you to finish. Actually, two comments or my recommendation. I agree that we need training, development of members because it sounds like this is my first meeting. Sounds like it's a very important committee. So it's important for us to be trained. And I think I was saying to Kanchan, maybe LGA can deliver something, training for us, training from LGA. The second comment, I think, go back to my councillor colleague over there, is there are terms, these papers are long. There are terms, maybe you can have a glossary at the end. If you can't change into simple English, then have a glossary at the end. So I can go back and have a look at it and say, okay, what does this mean? And then go back to it and maybe something like that would help us, because I think I was saying to Kanchan, I read it a few times, but I think we need to read it 20 times to understand the paper. So that's my suggestions. Thank you for the report, by the way.
Thank you. I have to, if I can come in, if you look on the LGA's website, they did do a course last year. A couple of weeks ago when I looked, there was nothing I saw for audit and governance. Yeah, they did do a one last municipal year on risk management that I attend, and I had a meeting with Kanchan afterwards to bother Kanchan. So, and Gloria. So that's something, just keep looking on the LGA's website because they do regularly update it. And I did find that with the risk training that they provided, it sort of went in deeper to what we're doing here, and it was really good because you heard what, and we did bounce off, because you know how the LGA does, you bounce off from other local authorities. And then what I did, I came back and I had a meeting. No, I didn't come back. I emailed Kanchan on the same day. It's like, so we had a conversation, and I think if you do that, councillor, probably, but there was nothing on audit and risk the last time I checked. But email Grace Collins, and she's always good at coming back if you don't mind me coming in and say that, yeah? Thank you. And so go ahead, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It'd be remiss of me not to say this. The other side of good governance improvement is the Good Governance Institute, which has a knowledge library that's free and open access to anyone. You just type in Good Governance Institute on Google, and it has a huge repository of free articles, free knowledge papers, free tools, some of which will be really pertinent, some about the specific functions of audit and governance committees, some actually about the art of constructive challenge. So regardless of the subject area or the focus of the committee, what makes effective constructive challenge? What are the different types of challenge questions? And like I say, they're all free and open and access to anyone. So you might find some useful resources on there.
Are you saying that the Good Governance Institute, there is no paywall for us? There's no code, no unique code that we have to contact officers and officers need to contact you for us to get in access. Is that what you're saying? Because I'm sure you understand there are many other organisations that do that. This is not the case.
No, I confirm it's completely open access. It's always been part of the mission.
See, good to answer your question. Well done, thank you. See, it was a Sorry, thank you. The recommendations before us, but can I ask officers that we have a conversation about, because we're going to get assessed on a yearly basis, and those that knows me that I'm a very outcome focused, and I aspire for us to always reach outstanding. So we need to sit and plan the work. This is not the space to do it, but we need to create that time and space to pick up what has been said on many levels. And I know we're all busy, but we do need to do it because it's for the residents of Luton at the end of the day. Are we okay, officers, on that? And I am having some time off in August, so the sooner we get a date in our diaries, the better. Thank you. So if we look at the recommendation, point 4 on the page, on page 5, it says the Audit and Governance Committee is asked to consider the findings and recommendation for the report and agree an action plan. I've already started discussions with officers. Are we in agreement with that statement?
Yeah.
Any dissents or against? No? Thank you. On that note, you do not need to stay here any longer, but you're more than welcome to.
Bye.
Thank you. And if you're leaving now, safe journey home. Thank you. We now move to item 8. Take care, and we'll stay in touch.
Okay.
Right, we move to item 8 and page 22, shared anti-fraud service report. Over page 22. Over to you.
Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. And for the new members here this evening, my name is Darren Bowler. I'm a counter fraud manager at the Shared Anti-Fraud Service, and I offer the apologies for absence for Nick Jennings, who's the head of service. I'm assuming that everyone's had an opportunity to read and review the report in the bundle this evening, and I'm going to give you a brief summary of some of the points within it. So over the course of last year, financial year, the SAS provided a variety of functions for the council during the year. And some of these functions are referenced immediately before the full report and can be found at Appendix 1 on page 27 of your bundle. The team of accredited and trained staff was fully staffed throughout the year and available to support investigations for the council. In relation to operational days, which appears later on as a key performance indicator, we were to report on the delivery of days to the council this year. The reporting functionality of a newly acquired case management system was not operational, or only partly operational in the first half of the year. Unfortunately, therefore, we were not able to provide accurate data for the number of days recorded against that KPI, which is 710 days. Now, that's not to say that the days were not completed. The position was simply that the functionality of the case management system was not available to record it. The council does not buy a number of day service, as in some audit models, but has effectively a 360-day service from the Shared Anti-Fraud Service. The provision of our time recording data is to enhance our MI reporting and support this committee and senior officers with additional assurance. By the second half of the year, however, the reporting function was working correctly, and based on that data, we believe the council can have assurance in receiving the full allocation of those 710 days. Risk of fraud. The council was provided with a fraud risk assessment in relation to undisclosed motorable working by officers, which has been seen with agency and short-term staff, highlighting the issue this raised for the authority. In the year, we provided specific executive reports relating to issues in housing and generic executive reports for risks regarding payroll, concerns of insurance, and the use of mayoral certificates, letters of thanks and appreciation. The threat of fraud is ever present, and so the Shared Anti-Fraud Service provided a number of bi-monthly alerts in the year and also more regular notification of immediate threats, in particular internal fraud, cheque fraud. Yes, that is still a thing, cheque fraud. Email account compromise and mandate fraud. An example of this service can be found in a case study on page 30. A headline update on the fraud investigations. Detail of the type of fraud and who is reporting it can be found at page 31. Referrals were slightly down this year, but that's not indicative of any trend or concern. Staff reporting remains at a good level. At the end of the financial year, 91 referrals and cases remain under investigation. Just by way of comparison, that figure currently stands today at 89. The increase of reviews and use of compliance model for appropriate cases has increased. This model has provided a speedier resolution and prevention of ongoing fraud loss, whilst allowing for more resource to be given to more serious investigations. Case studies throughout the report illustrate the nature and type of investigations undertaken. Teams across the council were supported uploading data and reviewing the National Fraud Initiative and Fraud Hub matches. Officers reviewed a total of 6,480 matches, resulting in 734 errors or frauds, with combined loss and savings of around £1 million. The value of fraud prevented using the Fraud Hub in the year was £437,000. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Underwood.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the check frauds. I mean, a lot of these case studies all seem quite old-fashioned. That's the right term. Is there no sort of, what's the word, IT-related fraud going on?
Unfortunately, there's all sorts of fraud going on, Councillor, I'm afraid. Check fraud, being something that used to be present, fell out of favour because people stopped using cheques. There are cheques still in existence and people still use cheques, so it was appropriate to issue that particular report just to remind people of what we used to do, and for some people who have never dealt with cheques, how to ensure that what they're looking at is genuine, that it hasn't been altered, and just to pick up on some of these things. There is a saying, there is nothing new in fraud. These things are cyclic and will go around and reappear at some point, just in a different way.
And you mentioned in the first case study about artificial intelligence, the invoice fraud, and the threat posed by AI is evolving at a rapid pace. I mean, are you confident? I guess it's like an industry-wide question. Are you confident that we can keep up with that evolving threat?
I'd be very foolish to say that we could all keep up with whatever technology advances that are rapidly beyond us. AI fraud actually, whilst it presents a challenge for us, it sometimes can help us out, because that email that reads too well, that appears too genuine, that starts off with good greetings of our health, wellness and happiness, which wouldn't do normally, may raise other concerns. So it's ever vigilant and follow the procedures. The council has very good procedures in place to prevent, we refer to them mandate frauds, or anything that comes through on email in relation to payment or demands for payment. And if those procedures are followed, then the council is well protected. We rely on those people to put those checks and balances in place, hence the alerts that go out to remind people of what they should and shouldn't be doing. And we hope that people pay attention to them, at least in the sense of, I heard something or I read something. Is this what I'm looking at now? As long as they've got that ability to understand what they're looking at, then we've done our job and we've stopped that fraud. So,
Councillor Hussain.
Probably not in this report, but it's a question to you, which I recently had. Somebody living in a sheltered accommodation in a particular area, they had gone abroad for a considerable amount of time. They put somebody else in there. Can they legally do that? I was told that they can legally do that.
Councillor, I'd love to hear from you outside of this meeting, and perhaps we can discuss that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, is there any preventative measures been taken to stop this kind of frauds? For example, housing benefit, council tax fraud. Because when people are receiving their, housing council tax bills, I've never seen any kind of leaflet or anything that is, giving any indication that, if you do any fraud, will take action against this, and we have got appropriate teams there to take action against those things. Is it ever thought about like that? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Chair, there are some issues with things going out in envelopes with the council tax bill, which perhaps is not for this meeting. That said, firstly, housing benefit is a matter for the DWP. So it's not, whilst the council administers that money, that would be an offence committed against the DWP. We work jointly with the DWP when we have cases where it's joint housing benefit and council tax are involved, and we will support each other's prosecution because effectively the evidence gathered is the same for the housing benefit fraud as it is the council tax fraud, because often it's applied for on the same form. When it comes to council tax, within the report we talk about the compliance model, and that largely is what that's referring to. So at a very early stage, we pick up on what may or may not be going on and take some immediate action. And the reason for that is we want to stop the loss as soon as possible. We don't want 6 or 9 months of an investigation when the loss is £300, £400, £500 already, and we run the risk of not recovering that. So an early intervention with an appropriate way of dealing with that to prevent further loss and recover what's outstanding within that financial year raises a bigger chance of the council tax team recovering that amount of money. In relation, getting back to the original part of the question in things going in the council tax bill, there's plenty of warnings on the council's website. The case studies that you've seen, at least 1 or 2 of those have appeared in the local press. So we look out for those to be publicised in that way. And perhaps we could discuss afterwards the issues around putting things in the council tax bills when they go out.
Thank you. I have to say, if you're ever around daytime TV, BBC One, there's lots of programs about people getting caught and the investigation work that officers and your department and others are doing to name and shame. And I know, and they always say this was reported in. So somebody, member of the public, being vigilant is doing that. I was quite amazed on some of those. I've got a few questions. So there will probably be easy answers. On point 7, with regards to the data, you finish off. We are just unable to use the CMS data to confirm this. When will point 7 on the management data, the case management system, page 27.7. You did touch on it in your talk.
Mm-hmm. It's working as of it's working as of the second half of last year.
Right. So when we do this, so when you do this report, this will not be in it next time. Can you confirm that?
Absolutely, Chair. It was an issue with the software on the system. It couldn't work in the first 3-ish months, a little bit more, and there was an issue in the second 3 months in it doing the calculations and being able to be used correctly. By the middle of the year, it was working. So we're at 574 days for the whole of the year in theory, but actually that's for just over 6 months. So there was a definite uplift in the second half of the year. It's working now. The staff are very happy and comfortable using it. Immediately after this meeting, I'll be using that time function to record my time here.
So we do not anticipate. So you do not anticipate in any update there will be a bug that's going to cause any issue that you'd be saying this to Gust again next year, like the Horizon project, post office. I am teasing.
I'm not. I'm going to avoid being drawn into that particular piece of. I'm no IT expert. All I can tell you is that it most definitely is working currently and has been since the middle of last financial year, and we've not seen any other issues. There are, of course, other issues with software, but that's life. I'm afraid, in the modern world.
Brilliant. Moving on, point 14. The council's e-training module for anti-fraud, anti-bribery, anti-money laundering is currently under review with officers from HR and internal audit. When will this be completed, please?
I'm afraid that's not an answer I can give you. We've been supporting HR and internal audit with that. There is a potential of an external company supporting that as well. So I'm going to not necessarily defer to others in the room, but I think someone may want to address you on that.
Okay, if we said for the minute this is an outstanding issue that yourself or HR can give us an update at the next meeting, is that fair? Because it may not be you, but we do need an update on that one then.
I'll report on its progress as soon as we're aware of what that is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you got that, Maria, for the meeting minutes?
Yeah.
Thank you. 20, there's the bit about payroll, fraud, money laundering. I've got a question. Any management for impact on the fraud alert? Do we measure? Do you get any measurements for us or anybody else on the impact those alerts have? Tangible data. You could say no, there ain't. It's fair, but I'm just asking the question.
It's not tangible. It would be anecdotal of people coming back to us and asking us questions, thanking us, or we sometimes see them being circulated around. But nothing where someone says we've spotted it and come back. I can't give that this evening.
Brilliant, thank you. And my last bit on page 37, you've got the KPIs, and you've got 23, 24. I don't know how you would design the page, but can we get a compare and contrast? Right, because the KPIs might have changed. So say we're looking at 3 years of data. We need to, I think it's important that we know any trends going up and down on KPIs, but I don't know if the KPIs are the same for 3 years. I don't know. That was my dilemma.
They're broadly similar, if not the same, especially when we're talking about return on investment, the first KPI, where those things are fixed points. When it comes to, in fact, actually, most of it is really because we're talking about the service we provide and the facilities that we afford you. So training events is numbered. That's specific. The number of days that we've already discussed is specific. Membership of certain other schemes. Those KPIs are the measure by which you can compare the financial input that having SAFs costs you. The reported fraud and things, that obviously changes. So throughout the report, there are trends of the fraud and what we see reported, who we see reporting it, and then the values of what we're seeing. So all of those figures are within the report. It does, Chair. I would say they're broadly going to be the same across each year. In reference to the presentation you had earlier, I think the focus for us, certainly anyway, is on the trends of where we are seeing fraud across the authority. Where do we see the weak points? Now, it doesn't need to be a massive spike. It could be one or two incidences which may lead us to think that there might be a lack of training in an area. Perhaps we need that lift. So the executive reports are a form of a risk report that usually follows our investigations where we identify things like those, and they are shared widely with senior officers to focus in on if there is a problem, what was it, how can we prevent that, and what fixes do we need to put in place. So those areas I would suggest would be this committee's would benefit from this committee's attention rather than the KPIs, because that whilst they're important, of course they are, because they're a measure of our value for money. Where we're talking about concerns and issues affecting directly the finances of the council, it's in the fraud figures or the lack of those. Where is the good practice? Why are we not seeing it there? And how do we compare to other authorities? Many of the things that were mentioned earlier.
Thank you very much. Have anybody got any more questions on this paper or comments? No? Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now move to item 9, annual report, operations of the council, whistleblowing policy and activity under the regulations of Investigatory Power Act 2000. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. This report is presenting on behalf of the Monitoring Officer, Mark Turner, who's not here today. The purpose of this report is twofold. Firstly, to inform the committee of the number, nature and outcome of the whistleblowing complaints that have been received during the 2023-24 municipal year. And then secondly, to inform the committee of the activities under the council's power using the Regulatory and Investigatory Powers Act 2000, or as RIPA, as we like to refer to it. So in relation to first of all, the whistleblowing complaints, the committee is recommended to note this report and to consider whether it wishes to make any recommendations to the Standards Committee on the development of the council's whistleblowing policy. The council's constitution places responsibility on Audit and Governance Committee to consider general issues and statistics in relation to the council's whistleblowing policy and to make recommendations to the Standards Committee for the development of any policies where appropriate. As far as what whistleblowing is, it has been defined as speaking up or raising a concern, but it's about ensuring that if someone sees something that's wrong in the workplace, they're able to raise this in their organisation to the regulator or wider. And ultimately, whistleblowing protects customers, staff, beneficiaries and the organisation itself by identifying harm before it's too late. The council has had a whistleblowing policy of some sort in place since 1999, and it was most recently revised on the 5th of January 2016. And the whistleblowing policy doesn't cover school-based staff who have their own procedures. Also, the whistleblowing policy, it's there for people who feel they cannot or fear retaliation if they raise concerns, but it's not intended to replace other more appropriate routes such as the council's grievous resolution or unfair discrimination, bullying or harassment procedures. As far as the numbers of whistleblowing complaints, there was 3 complaints that were received during the 2023-24 municipal year. One of the complaint related to the misuse of a blue badge. One was in relation to social care establishment, and one was in relation to staffing issues within the Luton Council. And one of these was anonymous. Of these complaints, the complaint regarding the misuse of blue badge was removed from the whistleblowing process when it was established that the alleged offender was not, as originally thought, an employee of the council. So that matter was dealt with during the usual channels. In relation to the allegation complaint to adult social care, this was in respect to a third-party provider providing poor practices, and at the time of writing, this is still under investigation, but it's already been drawn the attention to the adult social care safeguarding team. And in relation to the staffing issues, that was investigated, and that one was not upheld, but it was fully investigated. So in relation to the whistleblowing update, you just asked the committee just asked to note the report and as I say, consider if there are any recommendations it wishes to make to the standards committee. I don't know if you want me to stop and discuss that bit before I go on to the other in relation to the RIPA, or whether you wish me to go on and the RIPA now.
We can just stop there, Sam, because what I didn't do for the last report, I didn't remind members what they were recommended to do. So if I can just go back to the previous report, members are recommended to note that activity undertaken by the shared anti-fraud services to deliver the 2023-24 anti-fraud plan for the council, and B, note all anti-fraud activity undertaken by council officers and SAF ASFS to protect the council and the public funds it administers. So we've noted that.
Yeah.
Going back now, correctly, back to where I did a little mistake there. Item 9, have we got any questions for the Deputy Monitor Officer on the report? But Underwood, get gone.
Thank you, Chair. So in relation to the complaints about the third-party provider of social care, how does that work? I mean, so are potential whistleblowers at the third-party provider? Are they aware that who should they notify? And is it council that they should notify first, or?
So the whistleblowing policy, someone can make a referral. We don't encourage that they are anonymous, but they can be anonymous if somebody fears reprisal. Once that whistleblowing complaint has come in, someone will investigate it. Look at an investigator is first of all, it's looked to see if the complaint falls within the whistleblowing procedure. It might be more one of the other procedures, bullying, harassment, or grievance policy is more appropriate to investigate any particular complaint. I don't know the exact circumstances of this particular investigation. That is still under investigation, but it will the investigator, where the person, where they know who's made the complaint, they would speak with the complainant, find out what the issues are, interview those people that it feels relevant, and then there'll be a report with recommendations. In relation to this particular one that's still under investigation, some matters have already been brought to the attention of the adult social care safeguarding team that have come out of this investigation.
Any more questions, colleagues? Any comments? Do you want to carry on, Sam?
Okay, yeah, so the second part of this report is to inform the committee of the activities that have been undertaken using the council's powers under RIPA 2000. So the council's use and conduct of covert surveillance techniques when investigating serious criminal offence is permitted by the regulations. In order for officers to use this power, the policy is quite, and as it should be, it's quite structured. They will need to get permission from service director, and then the monitoring officer will see, because it is intrusion on people's personal privacy. But it can cover the use of say various covert surveillance techniques, hidden CCTVs. Things like that. It's overseen internally by the council's monitoring officer, who acts as a senior responsible officer for the purpose of the Home Office Code of Practice, and externally by the Investigatory Power Commission's Office, the IPCO, and they conduct periodic inspections on the public authorities who are entitled to use this. They look at policies, they look at how it's being used. I can say in relation to the this council's use. There was no use of the powers conferred on the council under this Act in the municipal 2022-23 municipal year. The council's policy and procedures were reviewed in 2023 when there were some administrative changes that were made, and they were made in response to a finding of an IPC inspection that was in July 2023. The revised policy was approved by the executive on the 9th of October 2023. Thanks, Chair.
Colleagues, any questions? Yes, Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Samantha, for the report. I wanted to know what you mean. Can you give me an example of serious criminal offence? What do you mean by that? Give me.
The powers can be used, for example, trading standards have used the powers to put up a static camera to try and see what was happening in a business, the vehicles coming in and out. It's when there's an offence or an offender that's identified, and the surveillance of that offender is covert. So it's not like your traffic cameras that have got signs and they're very overt. It's the secretive filming. I know the DWP, for example, use it a lot to see when people are claiming they're living on their own and it's suspected that they might have a partner living with them. They may use the power to put up some sort of, have some sort of surveillance to see who's coming in out the house and whether it looks like a couple are living together. Its use is not trivial, which is why we have there's been no use of it in the last year, but where appropriate we do have the power. The council does have the power to authorise officers to
Thank you. Yeah, I was just trying to understand which one is it that the police will do and which one is it that we were. So thank you for clarifying.
That's okay. The police obviously have the powers to use covert surveillance as well. So the local authority would use it for offences that the local authority would prosecute. There has been criticism historically when local authorities have used. I think there was a dog fouling thing that hit the news, and local authorities were for filming people, and that got questioned, which is why there's quite a lot of regulation as to is it proportionate for the offence that we're investigating. But yeah, it would be for the type of offences that the local authority could prosecute or would prosecute, that the local authority would use its powers under RIPA.
Supplementary. So if I use an example, let's say someone lives in a council house and they say they live there, but they don't. And if the council suspects that they don't live there, would that be an example?
It may be, and the officer, if there are not other more intrusive ways, they might ask for permission to use covert surveillance. So that is a good example of where, yeah, the sort of things that it could be used for.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. If there's no more further questions, we go to the recommendation. The committee is recommended to note the report and to consider whether it wishes to make any recommendations to the Standards Committee on the development of the Council's whistleblowing policy. Are there any recommendations we wish to make to that committee? No? Okay, then. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, go ahead.
I think there's a further recommendation in relation to the RIPA policy as well.
So there's a further recommendation.
Just trying to find. Sorry.
Where is that I've missed?
Sorry. Apologies, Chair. I'll just find.
No, that's okay.
I think. Right, no. Oh, no changes are proposed to RIF policy at this time. Sorry. Thank you, Chair.
Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 10, internal audit annual plan. Kanshan, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an overview of the work undertaken by internal audit during 23-24, which informs the annual audit opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the council's control environment, and also to provide the committee with assurance over the effectiveness of internal audit and compliance with the public sector internal audit standards and the SIP for local government application note. The main point to note from the report is that whilst there are concerns on some areas, an adequate level of assurance can be provided in connection with the Council's overall control environment. This opinion is based on assessment of the reviews undertaken by internal audit during 23-24, follow-up of the actions against audit recommendations made, management responses to findings and recommendations, any effects of significant changes to the financial systems, assurances received from other sources where they have been available, and the extent of resources available to deliver the audit plan. I am satisfied that there has been sufficient coverage of the audit plan and that the reduced level of resources available has not impacted the annual audit opinion. We achieved 87% of the plan against a target of 90%, which is a good achievement considering the resourcing issues the team have faced over the last year. The exceptions noted within the report are the 2 limited and the 2 no assurance audit reports issued during the year. These are detailed in tables 1 to 4 from page 58 onwards in the agenda pack. If I may just spend a couple of minutes just going through those. The 2 unsatisfactory opinions raised by Mazars related to the Future Ready Transformation Programme. This review served as a backward-looking lesson learned about the Future Ready programme, which was initiated in 2019 and which did not lead to successful completion of any core projects. The audit focused as a lessons learned exercise and what the council can take forward into the next phase of its new transformation programme. It should be noted that the implementation of this programme coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic, and this hindered the delivery of the planned transformation. COVID-19 added unprecedented additional pressures on the council budget, and to plan and manage this impact, full council approved an emergency budget for 2021 in July 2020, which did result in delivery of £23 million savings. The key learning points from this audit review were, while there was a programme board in place for governance purposes, we did find there was limited evidence of the oversight and the mechanism to oversee the delivery of the programme, such as having a programme management office or any change control procedures. The programme further failed to establish a resource plan for which to inform resource allocation, leading to the potential for poor resource utilisation and limited achievement on value for money. Since the review, management have confirmed that the agreed recommendations have been consolidated with the learning from the recent LGA corporate peer review into a single action plan. The LGA corporate peer review and a specific peer challenge on the transformation programme both recognised the clear governance framework and delivery structures that have been established for the new transformation programme, and that there was a strong foundation to build upon. They did highlight the need to continue improving on the use of data and evidence to ensure benefit realisation, and that the council builds its internal capacity and skills to deliver change. A programme management office has recently been established and is now working on creating a suite of standardised templates and governance to underpin the new transformation programme and the next phase of delivery. The second audit, which received an unsatisfactory opinion, related to housing statutory compliance. This audit raised concerns in regard to the management and integrity of the data the council used to inform their statutory compliance practices. There were inherent functionality issues with the housing management system, which hindered the efficient and effective management of ensuring compliance across the various compliance programmes. The system functionality issues increased the administrative burden for the Building and Technical Services team to monitor the properties they are responsible for. There was also a lack of clearly defined roles and responsibilities for data integrity, which resulted in not a single list of properties being maintained, although the service do maintain various unconsolidated lists. And there was no reconciliations being undertaken between the housing management system and the different compliance programmes. Management have confirmed that a new housing management system is being implemented, which is looking at the property structure. In the meantime, reconciliation of property lists from different compliance areas are being cross-checked to ensure the risk of missing properties is minimised. It is anticipated that the new system will provide a better property data handling function, and a cross-departmental group has also been formed to facilitate a proper handling of property data. The outcome of this will be to ensure that properties the council is responsible for compliance is robust and trusted within the new system. There were 2 limited opinions which have been reported to this committee previously. These relate to the bank reconciliation follow-up review, where we have previously reported there are system functionality issues within the daily bank reconciliation module. The management update in relation to this issue is that the IT provider will be undertaking internal adjustments required to perform accurate daily reconciliations. The second audit, where a limited assurance has been previously reported, is the PCI DSS readiness project. There's one final recommendation which was outstanding on this, and this was in relation to ensuring that the telephone payments are taken via a secure platform. So the service leads led by technology team have been actively working towards achieving compliance with the standards, and following successful system tests, they have agreed on a procedure to ensure that these payments are taken compliantly, and they have successfully implemented this in customer services, and all services are now being enabled to use the software, but there may be some training and awareness sessions which are to be scheduled in. During the year, we also received requests from management to undertake internal audit reviews on 3 areas of concern. One of this is in relation to the community-led local development programme, where internal audit were requested to conduct a review of the circumstances which led to the Department for Works and Pensions terminating the contract and funding, and a summary of the findings from this review is detailed in Table 6 of the report on page 62 onwards in the agenda pack. In addition to this, there were 2 other areas, and these audits are currently being concluded by Mazars. The second one relates to the ICT transformation project, where internal audit were requested to conduct a review of the adequacy and effectiveness of the key controls and processes relating to the management of the ICT transformation project. Concerns were raised by management over the project governance and budget overspend. As this review is in the process of being concluded, we should have a further update for the committee at the next meeting. Arclight building contract management was the third area for review. Again, management requested internal audit to conduct a review of the governance arrangements in place for the management of the dilapidation repair works and refurbishment. Again, concerns were raised over project governance and budget overspend. This review is also in the process of being concluded. So again, we should have a further update for committee in relation to that audit review. Whilst these 3 areas are unrelated, we did note that in each case there were issues relating to project governance, which ultimately led to an adverse impact on the council's finances. We do plan on carrying out further work in other areas where projects are being managed to determine the extent of these weaknesses across the authority and to address any concerns. In addition to the exceptions, the committee should also note that there are some positive points to note from the audit report as well. Some examples are the majority of the internal audit reviews completed by internal audit received an adequate or above assurance opinion. The target to ensure that 75% of all agreed recommendations are fully implemented by management has been met. Of the recommendations followed up, 81% have been fully implemented and a further 17% in the process of being implemented. Mazars have also recently completed an independent review of the council's governance and risk management arrangements and have issued a moderate, which equates to an adequate assurance opinion. In March 2024, the council also took part in the Local Government Association Peer Challenge. The review concluded that Luton Council is trailblazing and has an ambitious Luton 2040 vision. The leadership team members and all council staff are fully committed to improve the outcomes for the diverse community of Luton, and the vision is widely understood. The peer team did raise 10 key recommendations which have been agreed by the council, and an action plan has been developed. There was also an external review commissioned to assess the effectiveness of the performance of the council's Audit and Governance Committee, and which the committee received a report earlier today. reflecting on the Audit and Governance Committee's performance over the past year and identifying areas for development is a valuable exercise and helps the committee to demonstrate its openness, accountability and role in supporting good governance. The committee has also received a separate report on the anti-fraud work undertaken by the Shared Anti-Fraud Service on behalf of the Council. In a recent self-assessment of internal audit against the public sector internal audit standards and SIP for local government application note, has confirmed that the service does generally conform to the standards. And as part of the LGA corporate peer review feedback from interviews in relation to internal audit, this was positive, and internal audit was also seen as effective, and feedback suggested this was a robust service provision to the council. The recommendation for the committee is to receive the internal audit annual report for the financial year 23-24 and to note the annual audit opinion on the council's overall control environment. I'm happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Colleagues, any question? Councillor Underwood, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The transformation programme talks about the programme management office. Is that just applicable to, is that just working on the transformation programme?
Where there's any kind of transformation programs in place, normally have a project management office, so they would oversee the project, and if there's any kind of changes or resource allocations, they would be the first point of call to kind of manage and administer that programme, and then obviously report up to the board, which kind of manages and makes the decisions around the transformation programme.
Okay, it just seems to me that looking at, say, for example, the first two cases, the bank reconciliation and the PCIDSS readiness project, where the problem seem to have occurred when you're introducing new systems, if there was some kind of oversight or methodology in place for the introduction of any new system, would that help to mitigate against the sorts of issues that have arisen?
Normally, when there's an implementation of a new system, there is a normally, you kind of work with the IT provider, and they normally have a checklist to kind of work through, and there is a testing function available as well, just to kind of see how is that translating into the new system and is it working effectively before you're signed off. In relation to the bank reconciliation module, I don't know if a colleague would be able to comment around the bank reconciliation. If I could hand over to John on that one, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Kensha. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're making progress with the bank reconciliation, and we will commission Civica Financials to actually make the adaptations that we need made to the module, so that we can expedite a regular bank reconciliation process, something that's overdue and is now a matter of urgency. So we'll be getting on with that. And that will facilitate us to produce timely and complete bank reconciliations. So it's high on the agenda for action. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Underwood?
Yes, can I come back? Just trying to get an idea of when the new bank reconciliation process was introduced, there was a full testing program, user acceptance testing, that all happened.
Yes, there was user acceptance testing, but I think at the time, which we're going back to 2021, before I joined the authority, I'm not sure it was signed off adequately in finance, to be honest, and things progressed quickly. And subsequently, we've identified some problems with that particular module, so that's why we're still scratching those wounds, to coin a phrase, so that we can nip it in the bud, get it sorted now, and progress with something we're comfortable with into the future. There was some testing, but perhaps wasn't adequate enough at the time.
Okay, so is there a council-wide methodology for testing new systems? Is there like a set of protocols in place that you, step one, step two, you must do this, and etc.?
There is a set of protocols and a set of procedures in place that you work through with IT, but it really depends on the system that you're introducing, because it would be needed to be tailored according to the system and what the requirements are of the system. And again, the IT team would be working with the client or the users to determine at what stage should the sign off happen, and are we happy to now kind of transfer from that system and go to the new system, implement that fully. So there would be discussions around that before they finally sign off that project.
Thank you. And presumably lessons have been learnt from what's happened.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Hussain and then Darcy. Go ahead.
Can I ask you, in terms of the CLLD positive outcomes, have we got any data in terms of the training or successful, employment and all that? I mean, there is quite a bit of funding of 1.6 million. And what were the outcomes? It says a positive outcome, but that doesn't tell me anything.
So as a result of that project, there were over 4,000 participants who were provided targeted support into education, training, or employment. So that was the outcome of that project.
Data, what in terms of employment or impact at all? Do we have any data at all? Just that 4,000 people. This
is the overarching, but certainly there would be a breakdown in terms of what the numbers look like and what specific training that they received. Yeah. So yes, there should be other data, and I can provide that data separately in an email.
That's my question, really.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've come across on page 97, that is regarding housing. There was a resident's death during the fires, and it seems like it's because of the lack of fire alarm. Is there any litigation expected from that, like legal action by the dead person's relative or anybody?
In relation to that one, I'm aware that there was a delay by the service in processing a referral to install a personal alarm for assistance at that particular property. The coroner did review that case, and their report did identify some measures to take place for the council to implement. The service did undertake an immediate review, and they did undertake immediate action to resolve some of those issues. As part of that, they have requested internal audit to undertake a full review of that service area and how they manage those referral processes, and also to have a look at the capacity within the team as well. So it is an area that we're looking at, and the service have been liaising with the coroners in terms of what measures we can improve going forward as well.
So are you expecting any legal action by the dead person's relatives or any other parties?
I'm not able to comment on that at the moment. I'm not aware of the circumstances around that.
Have you recommended for making any provision for compensation or anything?
The service would normally contact our insurance team, and then they would deal with that situation accordingly from advice with the insurers.
Right, okay. Because in such case, probably the provision should be made to, face any possible legal action and compensation, isn't it?
Yes. So the service would have liaised with the insurance team to be able to assess the situation and take those decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions, colleagues? I've got one. Following my sorry, Farouk, have you got any questions? No. You sure? Okay. With the CLLD, can you provide the information to Councillor Hussain as to outcome, because I think the measurements in the document change. But I would like us to know what learning has been picked up that's going to be implemented in regards to the big lottery funding now that we've got, because we've secured 1.4 million, if I remember correctly. And I don't want what's been picked up here to be repeated. So I think it's only right, because because that funding was focused around the community. We're going to get another pot of funding of a physical fund, and we will get not treated kindly by residents if we haven't picked up the learning and make sure. And we don't need the grief when we're going out walking that we haven't learned the lessons, and make sure that it doesn't happen with this, because it is about trust. We need to have trust with our residents. We know the need, we get the money, but then if there's things like I've read today, we're going to get a whole heap of questions from the community. So can you come back to us? If it needs to be in private, we do it, but we need to know the lessons in detail, what is learned. That is not going to happen again. Can you do that for us, please?
Yes, of course. I can
Thank
send that
you.
across, and also we can have a look at the bid lottery funding and what control measures are in place over that grant funding as well.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Right. So the report says, so make sure I don't run ahead of myself like I did before. The committee is asked to receive the internal audit annual report for the financial year 2023-24 and note the annual audit opinion on the council's overall control environment. So noted.
Yep.
Thank you very much. We now move to item 11. Yeah.
I wanted to ask a quick question regarding the internal audit areas, risk areas.
So you need to repeat that. We just passed. Do you want to annotate or add what you're asking?
No, I want to ask 2 questions.
So you've got some more questions?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
All right then.
Yeah. No. It's different. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
So I was just checking. I wasn't my. I was just checking for clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. Two quick things. These are very much linked with safeguarding of the children. I tried to find out a little bit more in our March meeting that what we are doing about the safeguarding of the children. And in recent time, I've come across lots of kind of comments about the safeguarding of the children in schools, especially that what is happening. Some school children are, instead of going to school in the morning, they are going in different directions and stuff. There are, obviously, we know about the issues in other councils in past that regarding the grooming and stuff. So is there any risk in Luton of that kind of grooming because of the number of complaints we are coming across nowadays regarding the children's sections in the morning before the school, going out in alleyways and stuff, and there are also, lads are following them. Have we considered any of this risk in our risk management?
The corporate risk register does have a risk around children safeguarding, and it does also contain the control measures in place around what the council is doing to mitigate against those risks. It's not one of the high areas from memory, but there are certainly measures in place and referral processes and various agencies that the council works with to address any concerns which may be raised. In relation to the schools, again, as part of the school's procedure, they do have an attendance officers in place at school. So if a student is not present at school and somebody hasn't phoned in if they're sick or a reason, the attendance officer should be picking up on that and identifying where that particular student is. So there are processes in place within schools to pick up any non-attendance issues, and if there are concerns as a result, they do have their own processes in place to be able to deal with those aspects. So there are some procedures in place and controls are in place in terms of dealing with those referrals.
What is happening is these children are going in school, but before the school starting, they're going in different directions. Even in recent days, lots of people from Angel Close, that is off Oakley Road or off Addington Way, they raised concerns. And these are the girls of a local school. And I've also received some complaints from some parents that things are happening like that. So if those things, are they in our risk register regarding any possible grooming going on or anything like that? Are you considering on the risk?
It's not something that I'm able to comment on, but I think if you do have some specific concerns, we can perhaps discuss this outside of this meeting and to see what the council can do in relation to those concerns.
Yeah, thank you. And one more quick thing is regarding the children's education in Luton. We know that most of the children, in Luton, obviously, are not doing that great compared to the national average. And many schools are basically behind of national average. So there is a risk that the Luton schools are going behind, consistently. So is there anything considered like this kind of risk, that how we can address these risks that to improve the schools' performance and also improve the education?
So I believe there are key performance indicators in place around that, we could certainly have a look at that and provide you with information on that separately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. We now move on to agenda item 11, approval of the draft statement of accounts for 2023-2024 and unaudited. That's page 92. I believe that's over to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so this is the draft set of accounts for 23-24, which are in draft along with the annual governance statement. And there's a rather large appendix that covers some 150, 160 pages, which was sent out on Friday, slightly later than we anticipated. What we need to note here is that the accounts represent a true and fair view, except for a number of areas, chiefly the collection fund accounts, where we are going to commission the services of an expert to check the work and make sure we're adhering to best practice and accounting convention. And in the backdrop of that, we're also looking at commissioning review of the statement of accounts in order to ensure full compliance with accounting standards. And along with that, we will be doing an internal review around financial systems and reconciliation processes. As it's been a long time since we've had the accounts audited, as we all know from past experience at the committee, we feel we need an extra bit of oomph here so that we can be confident about our position, and that's particularly around the collection fund, which for avoidance of doubt covers business rates and council tax, two huge income streams for the council. And finally, in terms of the fourth recommendation there, to note the recruitment of the permanent staff is ongoing, and also replacement of the current temporary closure accountant. Actually, better news on that. The current temporary closure accountant will be joining us when he returns from leave later this month. So we've still got the headache, and I use that word because it has been, of actually filling permanently and finally the job of finance accounting manager, which is effectively the closure accountant. We did have an incumbent who lasted 3 months, appointed February, left at the end of April. So it's been a difficult process in terms of getting staff in place, and hence we mention it here, because it's something is what we need is continuity rather than the churn of agency staff coming and going. The current chap is extremely knowledgeable and experienced, but of course he's not employed by Luton, so we won't have the benefit of his expertise once he leaves. So we do need to get an incumbent that has got the requisite skills to take us forward into the future. I have prepared a presentation, which I'm attempting to show now. And I will invite questions at the end. And I think rather than laboriously go through the report, because the report covers the core statements, I think it's best to do it in the form of presentation. Last couple of years we've done this, and I would invite some questions at the end. So I'll crack on with that, if I may, Chair, and talk you through the processes. So there are regulations that we stick to, and of course we would religiously adhere to those as far as we possibly can, and hence some of the issues about reviews is about adherence. We're going to make arrangements for proper administration. All the points here we are doing as best we can with the resources that we have. There is a full process, of course. And the committee and the executive are used to receiving reports that we would call budget monitoring reports. And there's a fundamental difference between budget monitoring reports and the statement of accounts, which I'll come to in the presentation. But that's the norm. And then there's the scrutiny from the overview and scrutiny committee. We try to prepare the accounts in accordance with the particular standards, and they are numerous. So we will always be looking at those. And in terms of timescales, we were hoping to release the statement at the end of May, but because of some of those issues I've mentioned, we're a little late. And in fact, we published the accounts on the council's website on the 5th of July, which was last Friday, and submitted the report to members of the committee. So we're a little late there, and there's reasons for that. The external audit process will begin very, very soon. The preliminary work is ongoing now, and Grant Thornton are our new auditors, and we're working with them closely, and we will support them through the audit process. And just because of all the issues around the backlog that the up and down the country that we've spoken of in past committees, there is a deadline of next May. In fact, I don't expect it will take that long, but that's testament to the fact that there's so many delayed audits up and down the country that it's going to take us a time to get the backlog done. Thank you. Okay, so there are 4 key statements within the statement of accounts, which I shall cover briefly here. Adjoining those statements, there's some 50-odd notes to the accounts, and there's more specific notes about the housing revenue account and the collection fund. So it's a huge piece of work, and we will cover some of the bones of what we're talking about. So, in terms of what members may recall, the bottom line is really where we are at the moment. There's a near break-even arrangement. That 30 in brackets is a small deficit at the end of the financial year, what we would call the management accounts. But the actual net deficit, as we take the accounting convention, is some 30.465 million. But we make certain adjustments to that, and there are certain fundamental things that are pertinent to the statement of accounts that are not necessarily prevalent in the way we report management accounting, and that's the bit in the middle there, which says the net adjustments required by statute to be added to the council fund as reported on the statement of account movement. And those are typical things such as the pension adjustments, depreciation of assets, which are very big figures, and valuation of assets, which again could be quite seismic. And we disaggregate those in terms of getting the management accounts, which is what this particular slide actually brings us to. So it's really about accounting convention and the difference between the two streams. Those are shown in graphical term here in bar charts. So you can see there's not a lot of difference between last year and this year in terms of the gross spend, the gross income, and the net. And those other adjustments that I mentioned, rather seismic. The one on the left, some 400 odd million pounds that this time last year. In fact, I think it was October when we were talking about the accounts. There was a huge change in the valuation of the pension scheme that affected Luton as part of the Bedfordshire pension scheme. In case it stands out like a sore thumb, it's to do with the pensions. And the other things that I mentioned around depreciation and valuation of assets also have their part to play. So the balance sheet, and I would say that this is the single entity. Now, what that actually means is just Luton Council as an entity. It does not cover the group, and the group would include the airport, Lal, and of course Vauxhall Homes. So the group is a rather different piece of work. We're working on the group accounts now. They'll be ready soon, but this, we've gone to press and we've published just what we call the single entity. So you can see here the difference between last year, this year, and there's a change. Some 21 million pounds on the balance sheet, and again, it's those issues that we talked about. Pension liabilities, usable reserves are reduced due to capital financing decisions, and certain assets, and reduction in short-term debtors, cash and cash equivalents, which I'll cover in more detail in a few moments. The cash flow statement is one of the other three aside of the balance sheet. So this tells us how the cash has moved between the two financial years, and the change in investing and financing activities was represented by movement in cash and investment in reductions between those 2 years. So it's quite seismic, and it covers all of those issues I've spoken about. So we have 1 year to the next, which is typical of how this presentation works. Now, more details about the balance sheet. Again, obviously single entity. In a moment, I'll give you more descriptor of those two changes. So I'm principally concerned here about the penultimate column from the right, which says change between the two financial years 22-23 and 23-24. So we've got a 90 million pound reduction in net assets, and we've got a 111 million pound increase in liabilities, decrease in liabilities, and we can explain that. That's the net effect is 21 million, which we saw on the previous page. So the assets have adjusted by debtors, some NNDR realignment, and that's linked in with the work we've talked about in terms of the collection fund and VAT debt reduction, where we've caught up and we don't have as much debt reduction debt sitting on the balance sheet with regard to VAT. There's a decrease in cash and cash equivalents, broadly similar to the liability changes, and that, if I drop down to the liability changes, the second bullet point, there's other local authorities, 25 million, and government debtors of 23 million, broadly the 40, and that's linked into how the council borrows money, some of it on short term, some of it on longer term, and has repaid certain debts. So they kind of counteract each other. So it's just really wrapping it all up within the balance sheet. The usable reserves is also an interesting area to look at. There's not been huge amounts of change between 22-23 and 23-24. 4.178 million, and the biggest chunk of that, of course, is capital reserve, which we can see as the one on the bottom, and that is represented how we've balanced the capital program for the year. The other changes are rather small and slight. I'll tell you more about schools in a few moments, but you can see the other changes are not huge, and we just conclude this bit by saying that almost all of earmarked reserves have been committed. There's a particular reason, which is why we refer to them as reserves. They're set aside for certain eventualities, and the statement of accounts gives a lot more detail, of course, of each of those. So the school reserve movement is an interesting one. I think it's implicit of the fact that schools like ourselves are experiencing cost pressures for any number of reasons. So there seems to be a trend of reducing reserves rather than adding to reserves. So in this case, we've got 2.9 million change year on year. Now, half of that broadly was a school going to academy status. So of course they take their money with them, fair enough. But the rest of it is to do with 26 of our schools, and I think there's 45, yes, actually drawing from their reserves because of, I wouldn't say financial difficulties, because it's probably planned into their schemes, but they've had to dip into their savings rather than to cover their costs from the budget they were given for the year. Maybe something to worry about, but not specifically, as there's still quite a balance on the reserve area there in totality for schools. The annual governance statement is also covered within the statement of accounts, and some of the things Kanchan was talking about earlier are covered in there, such as the highlights around internal audit and other headlines that are being reported, although we're not specifying anything specific here. The annual governance statement does a number of things: governance framework, review of effectiveness, review of internal control issues. So that is encompassed within the statement of accounts as a matter of course. So the annual governance statement is there as well. We do a quality assurance process on the accounts, of course, which involves a detailed timetable, initial draft by the financial accounting manager. That's the job I have trouble filling, but we do have an agency staff, as I mentioned. Quality assurance undertaken by myself. We stick to the external advisors around. We take advice from external advisors around the statement of recommended practice and the accounting convention. And of course, Dev, as 151 officer, has the final say and the final look over the accounts before we publish. And of course, at this stage, those accounts are in draft, as I mentioned. So there's a kind of health warning over that. In terms of the detail, year-on-year comparative figures, reasonableness check. Are any changes major? And if so, can we explain them? Ensure the figures agree to the ledger. That's an absolute must. The general ledger, Civica Financials, has got the figures on it. That's our book of accounts, and our accounts replicate what's in the general ledger. An absolute must for the external auditors. They will certainly check that. Figures and the narrative are consistent with other publications and reports. So we make certain checks to make sure that things tie up and they look right. I haven't mentioned the narrative report yet. It is referred to in the overarching report I've given. That gives a sort of background of what we do, employees and the visions and that sort of thing for the council. So as of today, this is the status. The statement of accounts is published on the website as of last Friday. So public inspection process is underway. So members of the public can ask questions about the accounts, and they do that through our external auditors, and we will service those as far as possible. We give them 30 working days. So that window is open now until sometime in August, in next month. Single entity only group accounts to follow and are in process. And the collection fund review will commence on Monday, the 22nd of July. And it's a piece of work we do need done to verify what we're doing and to improve upon what we're doing around collection fund accounting, because we need some expert advice in the area. Further review of the statement of accounts and control processes is ongoing. Grant Thornton have commenced the audit in terms of their planning, and they will now look at the more detailed arrangements of auditing the statement of accounts as we have set them as draft. And the final accounts will reflect all of the reviews I've mentioned and any other changes that the auditors wish us to make to those accounts. And we will come back to the Audit and Governance Committee with a final set of accounts later this year. Right, that's a very whistle-stop tour through the accounts. I'm conscious of the fact that there's a detailed report and appendix of which you may have particular questions. I would invite people to write to me through email to ask any more detailed questions about the numbers, but clearly I'm happy to answer any questions about the process, the accounts as they are, and I will leave it to there. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Thank you, Chair. My understanding, I hope I understand properly, is we have a 2-year plan, which is our budget will be squeezed down. Is that right?
Councillor, if you're referring to the grant we receive from central government, I think the indication that yes, local government grant has been reduced over the years significantly, but you've got the new government now, so we don't know. But we don't anticipate further additional grant, which will be coming towards local government, because I think NHS and education are two top priorities. So in the medium-term financial plan, you will see, which was approved by the council in February, we're not anticipating significant additional grant coming from central government. So the process for the 25-26 budget we are working on, and this is a constant challenge for the whole local government. Yeah.
Councillor Hussain.
Can I ask you, in terms of the school reserves, they're quite large, but is there any of the particular schools who have a large reserve that you are aware of, who are already in an inadequate position or are going through a difficulty? Example would be, say, Stockwood Academy. Do we have any influence if they are sitting on a large reserve and yet they are not, they're in special measures?
Thank you, Councillor. I think we'd have to refer that back to the service. I mean, I'm looking at a high level here and not really delving down into any specifics, but we'd be happy to take that question back and get back to you. I think because it's a good question, and there are risks and concerns about our schools in terms of resourcing, I would say. Yeah.
The example I give you is some years ago, Lee Manor was sitting on a very large reserve, and yet they were inadequate. And when I asked that question, and they said it's for a rainy day, I said, bloody storm is broken out, inadequate. So that's one of the serious concerns we have, and what influence we can make. In terms of the local authority one, I mean, we have pressure in housing as well as the homeless one, as well as the children's services and all that. Can you satisfy us in the terms of the risk for us, because the demand is increasing on a monthly basis rather than yearly? You have to look at the number of homeless people in the reception here every day when you walk through the town.
Definitely. I mean, I think Dev will probably want to take that question. You're absolutely right, Councillor.
Yeah, I think you're right. And when we brought the budget to the council in February, homelessness, temporary accommodation, social care, children, special education need, impact on income, commercial income. These are 5 or 6 areas which is causing 80% of the council overspend. So members, management team are working on deficit recovery plan. For instance, for temporary accommodation, we have planned to acquire properties. We've already bought significant amount of properties, but at the same time, we've got to manage the demand as well. So having preventative measures in order to manage. But I think it's a challenge. Temporary accommodation and homelessness is a challenge. It's a challenge for the council. It's a challenge for other council as well. But we are taking measures to want to manage, and then to move people from expensive temporary accommodation like B&B and nightly let to less expensive accommodation. But there's another area where we've discussed when we presented the outturn is supported living. And this area, there's a big significant overspend. So we are going through a detailed review of each cases of supported living. So housing is a challenge across the whole country. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you to Chair and Finance Director for giving the time and explanation regarding those 2018-19 accounts and the audit queries, especially the going concern issues. I appreciate your time. And in terms of deadline of annual accounts, it's kind of persistent that every year the annual accounts is delayed and deadline is not met. Is there any action been taken to overcome that situation?
I think the deadline to produce this year's account was 31st of May. The council account is very complex, so it's one of the most complex accounts in terms of our group and our exposure to commercial activities. Measures which you have to put in place in terms of first will be to recruit a closure accountant permanent, and that is a challenge across local government, across the finance sector. But it's not just a finance, getting planners, getting building control inspectors. It's a challenge to recruit good sort of experience, and you need experienced people and highly technical people. So as John mentioned, we have had agency staff which we have been using. We have been involved, and the team has been doing their best. And we tried on several occasions to recruit. And as John mentioned, we managed to recruit the permanent staff, and had a short stay, and he moved to another neighboring entity. So we will be recruiting. We put an additional market supplement on the job as well, over and above the grade. And we are planning to, if we have to, look at that grade and to put additional market supplement. We're prepared to do that. So, and myself and Chief Executive discussed that. We've discussed that with our auditors as well, to say our response is to. But the reality is there's a limit how much more market supplement you're going to put. Suddenly they might be close to the service director's salary. So we've got to assess that as well. So we're doing our best to get a proper experience and qualified. It's got to be a qualified accountant. So and I think getting sort of experienced qualified people. So what we do grow our own. So you will see Kanchan started with a council, and now as audit manager. You've got the like of Iqbal Latif started studying now finance business partners. We've got a lot of stuff which grow our own, but that's in terms of financial accounting is a specific skills we have not been able to grow in that area. Not everybody like becoming a closure accountant or financial accountant. So we've got on management accounting, we have been successful on internal audit as well. We are training a lot of staff for becoming qualified. So we got a succession plan, but the financial accounting, things like capital accountant and financial accountant, it's not everybody's, yeah. So we'll try to, yeah, and once we've got somebody permanent and somebody, you need continuity here as well. That's the issue. Get somebody can start, work 6 months, 9 months, leaves, somebody else come. The continuity is important. And we have been constantly advertising and even putting agencies, headhunting. So agencies going and approaching other closure accountant from other areas. So we've tried everything. So we'll try to get that post filled. And as I say, the chief exec myself, we've discussed if I agreed we are going to put more market supplement to try to look at the grade of that post, and then hopefully we'll get somebody.
Yeah, thank you. You are not getting the figures from the subsidiary as well. That is my understanding. And is there any reason that why they are not producing for your consolidated accounts that you can do with their figures?
So we've got the draft figures. That's another area, like the airport is complex. The value of the airport was in the region of 1.2, 1.3 billion pounds. So I had a meeting with the valuers last week, and we've got the first draft figures now. We had a meeting with the auditors, AZ, and when you get the value of the airport and a minor adjustment to the assumptions move the value by 100 million pounds easily. That's how sensitive those data are. And once we have the valuation, we need a tax computation and I think you're in the profession, you know about deferred taxation. So deferred taxation, if there's a revaluation gain or loss, you have to make a provision for tax as well. So those has been carried out by PricewaterhouseCoopers. So they are the airport tax advisors. Those two figures, we've got some firm figures now, although it will be subject to our auditors, Grant Thornton, and as their auditors to go in the valuation, because we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds of revaluation gain. So, and that figure we will be working and consolidating because it has been discussed high level, but the final figure can change once we go through the process. The final figure can change by millions. So that's why, as John mentioned, this is a provisional draft unaudited, but those airport are not big. We've got the foreclosed home accounts as well, so that has been produced. Now we are going to go through and consolidate because that's another technical aspect of the accounts. Not everybody carries out consolidation, so we'll do that consolidation and produce. But now, as at last week, we've got all the figures, and I think we're comfortable with the figures, but subject to audit, it can move.
One more quick thing, that is, the revaluation reserve for PPE, that is on the face of income expenditure. Is that supposed to be there on the income expenditure? Because it is obviously not realized. And the other thing is net negative cash flow on the cash flow statement. Sorry, my laptop charge has been finished, so I don't have the big pack in front of me. But that is 113 million negative cash flow. How that would be covered, that negative cash flow?
I think on the revaluation adjustment, that's what John mentioned. There's something which we do is the adjusting the accounts based on what you call accounting concept and what is the government. So the government, when we set the budget, we don't set a budget taking into account if there's a revaluation gain or loss, because the budget is more, if it's a gain, it's not cash, so we can't use a revaluation gain in order to pay for services. So when we set the budget, we don't put like depreciation, those who are familiar with depreciation like fixed asset, but what we put instead against statute is what we call minimum revenue provision. So like a provision to repay the debt. So the accounts depreciation and revaluation is for accounting standards, but statute based on government legislation, we prepare in a different way. So you will see some of those adjustments you mentioned. We will come back much more detailed how the revaluation flows into the income expenditure, which is the CIS, and it flows something which goes MERS, minimum sort of what it calls reserves movement. So, and then it goes to the reserve. So it's quite technical, but we'll take you through how the money moves from one account to another. The whole rationale behind, because when I joined local government after spending 15 years in private sector, did struggle to understand. But the rationale here is you make the adjustment in order to comply with accounting standards, because your accounts is consolidated with central government accounts, what called whole government accounts. So all local government and HS everybody get consolidated. And the way the accounts get consolidated for whole government account is based on accounting standards. But then, as a council, we set the council budget, not an accounting standard, but based on legislation which is more relevant to local government. So that's why you have to make these adjustments. So the rationale, you set your council tax, not taking into account revaluation reserve or depreciation, but you produce the accounts based on revaluation reserve and depreciation, reverse all those entries, and bring back to the council tax. So there is a rationale why it's done, and that's might make it complex. It's more complex than private sector accounting. So yeah, I've come 15 years I've done private sector, but it's got its ways of working, and absolutely everything makes sense. When you understand there's a rationale. Yeah, thank you. In terms of cash flow, the negative cash flow, 130 million.
Yeah. I mean, some of the changes that we've had around the valuation of the debtors would have affected that. I think I would like to look at that in more detail and get back to you, Neatly, because I think that there's probably a bit more in there that I can say off the top of my head. It's to do with the change in the debtors, which were quite seismic as well as we saw, but there may be other things as well. So I'll give you a better synopsis separately, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Is that okay, colleagues? I have to say, it did take a while for me to get my head around the accounts for local government, even though I had worked in public sector most of my working life in finance. When I was in finance, it was a bit head scratching to get. It took a while, but I did get there. So you will get there, and you got access to people that will take their time and word it appropriately. So please feel free to contact Dev or John, and they will still go on the phone and explain it, and maybe the conversion language of local government to where else you work might be what might be needed. Yes, Councillor Catskell.
Thank you.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Chair.
Chair, in terms of the reserves, do you believe that the reserves you've got are sufficient? I won't say adequate, because I know you always want more reserves from past experience when you've told us before, but do you think they are sufficient?
I think there's a few points, okay? When I've mentioned in the past, and I always mention that when I present the budget, is when you look at our reserves compared to other statistical neighbors or unitary authorities, okay, it's around the average. Yeah. So anybody looking at it said, but okay, we're not that high or not that low as well, but you're around the average. One of the things which, since I've been here preparing the accounts, we haven't used reserves to balance our budget, which is so far good. Yeah. Going forward, it's becoming a challenge. If tomorrow I have an upside in the CIS on the P&L account or comprehensive income expenditure, I would rather put it in reserves because we don't know what is ahead, coming temporary accommodation, homelessness. Yeah. So at this stage, I would say it's reasonable, we're comfortable, but I think we've seen our exposure in commercial activities and the airport, which is very good because we generate 28, 29 million net from the airport. But when we hit things like a black swan event, let's hope it won't happen in another 100 years, maybe when I'm gone. So, but when you hit these, where you lose 30, 40 million and you have to compensate from that, when you look from this lens, then our reserves, yeah, if we have to put some more reserves, we will. But what we're trying to do now is now the airport has recovered, it's reaching its maximum passenger numbers, hopefully in the next sort of 2 years. So when the airport is generating profit now, we've already agreed that we are not going to use dividend to balance our budget. So at least our budget is not balanced through dividend. And if you get dividend, we use it towards capital program. So it's much easier to stop a capital program than to start funding for services. So, and then what we're doing now, even before we consider taking any dividend, we are rebuilding a level of reserves in the airport. So we'll look at what is considered reasonable. I don't think anybody can plan for a black swan event. Otherwise, every company will be keeping billions of pounds in the balance sheet. So it's as much we can be prepared for an event. So we're building up the reserves in LAL. We are not putting dividend to balance our budget, and our level of reserves right now is reasonable. Yeah. So that's as much as what is around the corner. It's very difficult to predict. Yeah.
Is that okay? Or do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, well, it's more of a comment.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
It's you mentioned growing our own in terms of accountants and things. Problem with growing our own is they get poached by higher paying organisations. So it's a good thing to grow our own, but we probably need some sort of loyalty clause that chains them to us for a little while before they're taken away by somebody in London. But I like the fact that we're growing our own. It is a much better way of getting trained people who know about the organisation from the ground up, if you like. So I like the idea. I'm just worried that they'll get taken away from us.
And just to my chair here, I think I've been here 9 years, but two of my staff have worked 38 years with Luton and one 40 years. 40 years in Luton, 38. Of the last 2 years, they've retired. How do you replace somebody with 38 years of experience and 40 years of experience? Yeah. So it's not easy. Even if you grow our own, they won't get that old to replace somebody with 40 years. But the thing which we have to say, in finance, we don't have a high turnover of staff, so we have been a bit lucky. Darren Lambert, I'm sure you know, more than 30 years. Atif coming more than 20 years. Kanchan, yeah. So we have been blessed. We don't have high turnover of staff, but there are instances. You're absolutely right. My chief accountant, when 5 years, 6 years, just pre-COVID, got a job in county. So good for him. He was really good. Some staff Camden is only 20 minutes by train. So we do, yeah. But I have to say in finance, yeah, most of my senior staff and staff, they do stay. So we try to keep them, absolutely try to chain them. But yeah, we have been. I have to say, no, I haven't have high turnover. But it just take 1 or 2 key posts, and if you don't have somebody coming through the ranks, it's become difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. There is the challenge of growing our own, and we'll see what comes with the new government. Yeah. But we can't blame the generation out there. Millennium generation was taught by boomers to look after themselves, to go for the money, don't give no. So we can't, and it's we who raised them. They didn't raise themselves. That society raised them, and now we're bearing the consequences because they weren't taught to have loyalty and to look beyond the money. So onwards and upwards. We appreciate what the officers are doing. Yeah. I know it's challenging, and yeah. I've gone from a world where nobody wanted to bring me back into finance after 20 years, and now I'm getting no ends of emails saying, do you want to come back? So I just think we're just living in challenging times, and it's changing. And as you've identified somebody with that amount of knowledge that's going to leave there, I trust you're on a plan to transfer what you can of their knowledge to somebody else. The 40 years experience before they walk out the door. But we will say thank you for them for being here that long. That is the main thing. We can try, but we have to give credit. I hope we give credit where credit is due, that they were loyal and faithful. Thank you. So we've moved to page 92 and look at the recommendations. So I'll read them out. The committee is recommended to review and scrutinise the draft unaudited 2023-24 statements of account and the draft annual governance statement appendix 1 and make any comments or recommendations to the Director of Finance as appropriate in advance of the audit. And number 3, to note that the accounts give a true and fair view except for the following. 1, to note that Section 151 officer is going to commission a detailed analysis, valuation and assurance of the collection fund accounts by an expert in the field in order to address any issues and ensure it reflects a fair and true position at the 31st of March 2024. Okay. To note that the Section 151 officer is going to commission a detailed review of the statement of accounts in order to ensure that they fully comply with all the accounting standards. Yeah. Number 3, to note that the Section 151 officer has initiated a full review of the key financial systems reconciliation control procedures. Yeah. And 4, to note that the recruitment of a permanent staff is ongoing and also a replacement of the current temporary closure accountant who's coming back to us temporarily. His assignment comes to an end. So I'm glad there is going to be some continuity on that.
Yeah.
That any findings from these reviews be incorporated within the final set of accounts are disagreed by my members, my colleagues.
No.
You said no. You're joking.
No.
You're teasing. You're still alert. Right.
Okay.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for that. Move to agenda item 12, Audit and Governance Committee draft work programme.
Okay.
Right, colleagues. I think we just need to, with the work. Go on ahead, Dev. Yes.
Just before we look at the work program, Chair, I would like to brief the audit committee on 1819 accounts.
Okay.
So there has been a lot of discussion. Yeah, sorry. It's moving every couple of weeks. So we had a meeting with EY. So there's progress is being made now. So 1819, EY has concluded the audit, as was mentioned in March. So we are going to present the 1819 accounts back to the next audit, not next, the 9th of October audit committee, because we've tried to work with EY, but they've said it's concluded. So they are not going to do any further work on 1819. But because last time when we discussed it at audit committee was, I think, back in June, it's 12 months has elapsed now. So I have to look at that account, look at what we call post-balance sheet events, going concern from now to the next 18 months, and take into account all the work which is happening in 23-24. And we also have raised our concerns, as we've discussed in previous audit committee, to PSAA, who are responsible to appoint auditors, and we've raised some of our concerns, and we've did complain, raise our complaint with EY that has been dealt with by EY. So all these will come back, and the revised accounts, as time has lapsed quite a lot, to the 9th of October audit committee. Ernst & Young has started the work on value for money. So 19, 20, 20, 21, 21, 22, 22, 23, 4 years value for money, Ernst & Young have already started. So they've sent us a list, and that's bring back to the challenge, which, so we've got this year's audit happening, 4 years value for money audit happening, and 23-24 value for money happening as well. So we try to prioritize our resources, and I'm bringing an additional resource starting on Wednesday. So Robin and the council has already been always agreed we need resources. So there's another one starting on Tuesday. We've got one additional staff already working. So we are trying to pull resources from the department as well in order to support that audit. So that's positive in terms of we are moving, but 1819 is closed from EY point of view. So we are bringing the 1819 accounts for audit committee. And when we do that, then EY will bring their final report, and if any other report associated, if the planning issue, they will bring those reports. So that has been communicated to the partner. And then in terms of the deadline for the 1819 to be signed, that's the government backstop. Now we've got a new government, so they will bring legislation to say the backstop was supposed to be end of September, but this legislation will have to go through the process. The backstop might be pushed forward a little bit. So that's where we are, and just wanted to let you know we are continuously discussing with our auditors, and the value for money work from EY is progressing now. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just ask Dev, as our next meeting is not until the 29th of August, and I think there is the King's speech next week, if there's anything comes out between the next meeting with regards to the backstop, can you just drop an email to the committee members so you just make us know what has been agreed, what the government said? Because I think we were looking at September, and now I think it's looking like it's going to be moved to December. If we know for sure before the next meeting, if you can just drop everybody an email and just keep us informed. That will manage our expectations. If that's
Yes,
agreeable.
we'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope everybody's okay with that suggestion.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Skepelon,
Can I
yeah.
just add that anything comes out of the King's Speech that will affect the current budget, we would probably be advised to be notified by Dev as well. May change some things that we weren't expecting. It's all up in the air, and anything that might affect how we're working our program and what it might affect the budget if they make a decision on changing things, it will be beholden on us to know it as soon as possible on that.
Yeah, I would expect the officer would make sure that it's not just us that would be affected.
Yeah.
It would be the exec and the finance review group.
Yeah.
On any significant statements following next week. Our trust officers will keep us in the loop on that. Yeah, go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, so of course, any change in policy, change in strategy, of course, we'll look at it, what impact it will have on the medium-term financial plan. But the finance settlement, which was announced from the previous sort of administration, that won't change. So the allocation to all local government, which was agreed and already approved in Parliament back in February, that won't change. Yeah, but there might be other policies where those are not sort of co-funding. There might be more funding or less funding, but these are the things but our co-funding, which is announced in terms of our revenue support grant or business rates, Section 31 grant, we don't expect those to change. Yeah, thank you. But anything which will, of course, will brief all the members. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now look at the work programme, given the conversation we had on good governance, this is a bit subjective. Are we happy to just agree with what's here and get officers to arrange a date and a time? Sorry, go on, Councillor Underwood.
Sorry, Chair. Just got a question about an item on the 29th of August, the Independent Audit Committee Member Appointment Plan. What is that all about?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry. The item on the 29th of August, the Independent Audit Committee Member Appointment Plan.
Independent Audit Committee Member.
It's John's name. No, he's just there.
Is it? I will check that. Is it Independent Audit Committee member? I think the members have been appointed, independent members. Yeah.
But that hasn't been refreshed. Yeah. But maybe that I'll leave. I think Dev needs to speak to the officer. Maybe that shouldn't be in there because we've executed the plan, and I'm not aware of anything else we're going to add to the team. Maybe we just need to review, but I'm not sure on any. We're not doing any addition. Is that okay? That's clarity. Brilliant. So, is everybody happy with what's here, subject to that alteration, and we'll get a date in the diary when we can sit down and pick up the points where the good governance in the early part of the meeting. Yeah? I think on that note, that's it. Sorry, Councillor Skeppel, say that again. So you want us to note your apologies for the 29th of August. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Have a